Emily had always been adventurous, and she didn't think twice about thumbing a ride when her car broke down on a desolate stretch of highway in the dead of night. She had heard the stories about hitchhikers who vanished without a trace, but she had always considered herself street smart. As she stood there, her thumb outstretched, she couldn't help but feel a shiver run down her spine. The moon was hidden behind a thick layer of clouds, casting an eerie pallor over the dark road. Her heart raced as she anxiously waited for a car to come by. Then, the headlights of an approaching vehicle pierced through the gloom, and her hopes soared. A beat-up pickup truck pulled to a stop, and the driver's window rolled down. Inside, she saw a middle-aged man with a scruffy beard and a disarming smile. "Need a lift, miss?" he asked. Emily hesitated, her gut sending alarm bells ringing. But she couldn't see any other options in the cold, empty night. She climbed into the truck, hoping she was making the right decision. The driver introduced himself as Richard. He seemed friendly, with a warm, gravelly voice that put Emily at ease. They exchanged pleasantries, and Emily couldn't help but feel somewhat guilty about her initial suspicion. Richard claimed to be a truck driver, and the cab of his vehicle was cluttered with maps, empty fast food containers, and an assortment of tools. As they drove through the lonely, winding road, Emily's unease grew. The lack of traffic and civilization was unsettling, and she noticed that they were heading deeper into the wilderness. She questioned Richard's choice of route, but he brushed off her concerns, claiming it was a shortcut. In the distance, Emily noticed a flickering light, a small gas station with an open sign. Her heart leaped at the prospect of a safer place to continue her journey, and she insisted that Richard stop. Reluctantly, he pulled into the gas station. The gas station was a dimly lit, old-fashioned place. The shelves were dusty, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Emily rushed inside, hoping to find someone to help her or a phone to call for assistance. But to her dismay, the store was empty, save for a surly-looking attendant behind the counter. The attendant, a disheveled man with a scruffy beard, barely acknowledged Emily's presence. She approached the counter and asked if she could use the phone. He grunted and pointed to an ancient payphone in the corner. Emily fished for a quarter in her pocket, inserted it into the slot, and dialed 911. But all she heard was static. Frustrated, she hung up and turned to the attendant. "The phone doesn't work," she said. He mumbled something incoherent, and Emily felt a shiver down her spine. She decided to cut her losses and headed back outside to Richard's truck. When she returned to the truck, Richard appeared more agitated than before. "We should get going," he said tersely, not making eye contact. Emily felt trapped, and the feeling of dread that had been lurking in the shadows grew stronger. As they continued driving down the desolate road, Emily's fear reached a fever pitch. The landscape had become increasingly remote, with no sign of other cars or human habitation. She tried to break the tension by engaging in small talk, but Richard's answers grew shorter and more evasive. Emily's mind raced. She needed an escape plan, but there seemed to be no opportunities for it. They were deep in the wilderness, and her phone had no signal. She desperately wished she had never gotten into that truck. Hours passed, and Richard's behavior became increasingly erratic. He spoke to himself in hushed tones, occasionally glancing at Emily with a manic glint in his eye. Her heart pounded as she realized she might be in grave danger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Richard abruptly pulled the truck to a stop. Emily's heart leapt into her throat as he turned to her with a sinister grin. "We're here," he said, his voice laced with madness. Emily's eyes darted around, but all she could see was a thick forest, shrouded in darkness. Panic set in, and she scrambled to open the truck door, but it was locked. She frantically reached for her seatbelt, but before she could undo it, Richard lunged at her, his hands wrapping around her throat. Gasping for air, Emily fought back with all her strength. She clawed at Richard's face, kicked, and screamed as loud as she could. Desperation fueled her, and in a moment of clarity, she managed to push him away and unbuckle her seatbelt. She tumbled out of the truck and ran into the forest. Emily's heart raced as she sprinted through the dark woods, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. She could hear Richard's heavy footsteps close behind her, his deranged laughter echoing through the trees. Branches whipped against her face and limbs, and she fought through the pain, her survival instincts kicking in. She knew she couldn't outrun him for long, so she veered off the path, hoping to lose him in the dense underbrush. As she moved deeper into the forest, she stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin. Without hesitation, she burst through the door and slammed it shut behind her, frantically searching for something to barricade it with. Inside, the cabin was a nightmarish scene. The walls were covered in strange symbols and gruesome drawings, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. Emily's terror grew, but she knew she couldn't stay hidden for long. Emily desperately searched for an exit and discovered a rickety wooden trapdoor in the corner of the cabin. With trembling hands, she lifted it and descended into a dimly lit basement. It was a maze of narrow tunnels, and she realized she had stumbled upon some kind of underground lair. With Richard's voice growing louder and closer, Emily made a snap decision and crawled through the tunnels, her heart pounding in her ears. She had no idea where she was going, but she hoped it would lead her away from the deranged maniac pursuing her. Hours passed in the dark, damp tunnels, and Emily's hope began to wane. But just as she was about to give up, she saw a glimmer of light ahead. She crawled toward it, praying it was a way out. Emerging from the tunnels, Emily found herself in a moonlit clearing. The forest surrounded her, and the night was eerily quiet. She took a moment to catch her breath, her senses on high alert. The adrenaline coursing through her veins had pushed her to her limits. For a while, she waited in the clearing, listening for any sign of Richard. But he never appeared. As dawn broke, Emily cautiously made her way to the nearest road, hoping to flag down a passing vehicle. When she finally found help, she was dirty, disheveled, and terrified. The authorities were notified, and a search was launched for Richard and the cabin in the woods. In the end, Richard was never found. The cabin was located, and it turned out to be the site of unspeakable horrors. The police discovered evidence of numerous missing persons, and the symbols on the walls hinted at a macabre, ritualistic activity. Emily's harrowing tale had exposed a horrifying truth about the dark, hidden side of the world. Though she had escaped with her life, Emily was forever haunted by the memory of her nightmarish ordeal. She couldn't shake the feeling that Richard might still be out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his next victim. The experience left her forever changed, a cautionary tale of the dangers that lurk on the open road. Hitchhiking had seemed like a thrilling adventure, but it had led her into a nightmare from which she could never truly escape.